Now, we finished the the definition of how to build a compelling vision. The second thing I now want to do with you is to say, what are the guiding principles for you as the leadership of Madagascar? And then going forward, uh, come back to these principles and just make sure you tick them as you go. The principles that I've put down there is whatever you do, you need to think and act generationally. It's my pet topic because in 2008, God spoke to me about this whole generational message, and I'm going to touch on some of it. Then survey the land because you have the legal and spiritual authority to represent the future economy and leadership of Madagascar. So you need to look at the map, you need to look at the provinces, the resources, the issues, the opportunities. I've just touched on some of that. We're going to talk about just legal and spiritual authority. We're going to talk about occupy the land and then finish off with a basic action plan. So the generational message, and again, you're free to use it or not, uh, but I can give you a lot of material around the generational message. Now, many of the things that we've put in place since 2008 is obviously not in place on your side yet. So on our side in South Africa, we built a community bank, we built financial services, all with the generational message. But at least you can share the message, even though you may not have all those components in place yet. So, with your permission, I'm just going to take you through the principle of the generational message. And I normally start off with a slide where I get people to say, listen, we're all responsible, whatever age group we are in right now. But the question we must constantly ask ourselves, because we will have to give account to our Creator one day, what world are we passing on to our grandchildren? And there's only one of two options. We're passing on a one generational world where it's about me, my, I, for now, quick fix, what can I get out of it? And that's how the world has programmed us. Government policies has programmed us like that. The education system, the media wants to keep us there because then the end result is a lack of resources so we can control the economy, resources monopolized, economic slavery, destroyed fragmented families, corruption, poverty, high unemployment, high crime rate, destroyed infrastructures. Now, does this sound like Madagascar at this point in time?
Unfortunately, yes.
So it's also true for South Africa. It's also true for most of the countries in the world right now. But there's a better way, and God showed me in 2008, we can become the founding parents of our family legacy, but then we need to create a generational world, three generations, and the end result of our efforts will result in abundance, resources unlocked, economic freedom for every family, whole families, not fragmented, where we are all responsible as stewards to manage resources, poverty eradicated, low or no crime, and functional and maintained infrastructure. So I like putting up these two extremes, the three generational world with the one generational world. And as we speak, there are families, generational families, that are already living and working in the three generational world. But 99% of the population, Christians included, lives in the one generation world. And then that brought me to a nice little picture that I love to share with people about uh, the father came home from work and he was tired. He just wanted to have a cup of coffee and put up his feet and read a newspaper. And his 10-year-old boy was happy to see him and say, Dad, come and let's play ball. And the dad kept saying, no, no, just give me a few minutes. And the boy kept pestering him. And eventually the dad said, okay, you know what? I need to keep this boy busy. So he looked into old magazines and he found a map of the world. And he pulled out the map of the world and he cut it into pieces, put it on a tray, gave the boy sellotape and say, okay, go and put this map together. And when you finished, come and call me. Then we'll go and kick ball. And he thought by himself, where will a 10-year-old boy be able to understand the geography of where's India, where's Africa, where's the United States? But 10 minutes later, the boy was back. Okay, Dad, I'm finished. Can we now go and play ball? And the dad said, let me see. And the, the boy had the map uh, put together perfectly. He said, but how did he do it? You're not supposed to know where's India, Africa, USA, and all of that. He said, no, Dad, I don't know where that is. But when you pulled out that picture, I saw that at the back of the picture, there was a picture of a man. And I just put the man back together. Then the world fell into place. So that's a beautiful story that I like to illustrate what's our job. So, country by country, it starts with putting the family together, put the man into place. This message of thinking three generational is not known in the outside world. A few families who are already there, they know it, but they don't share the information with the rest of the people. And because we don't think like founding parents, we tend to just do whatever else is happening around us, and then we end up in the world of lack and poverty and all of that. So you're quite right, and that's why in this kind of session, I make a point of highlighting the starting point is even before we worry too much about ICCC and the rest of it, we need to be firmly entrenched in understanding our role as founding parents that will lead our families not into the old way of thinking, but lead our families into this new way of thinking so that in time to come, we become these founding parents. I call them the Abraham journey that leave my past and go to a new land of promise for me and my family. So this is where we're heading with this whole thing. All right. So then how do we put the man back together? So what I'm constantly doing in South Africa, I'm talking to people from this generational mindset. So I'm saying that I'm going to hold up two mirrors. The one mirror you're quite familiar with, you see yourself in it every day, and it is this picture of this man messed up, hurt, not in a good space because of his one generation mindset that doesn't think beyond this year. And he ends up over indebted, no choice, no legacy, survival, economic lack and pain. But then I tell people, I'm also going to hold up another mirror for you, and that's the three generational mirror, and teach you if you want to become this person, become the founding parent, then in this mindset, you will end up with choices that come from three or more income streams. You will have the time, the money, and the health to enjoy it. You're experiencing a lifestyle of abundance, a life of significance, and really leave a legacy. And then I go through all my presentations and stuff. And at the end of it, I tell people now you've seen the two mirrors. It's now your choice with which of the pictures are you going to continue? So you're already in the first mirror. If you're happy to go back to that, that's fine, but then I can't help you because what we're going to do as a group is to help you on the second mirror, the three generational mindset. And I use then, and I don't put it on my slide, but you can go and look at it up. It's Proverbs 13, verse 22. Proverbs 13, verse 22. And for me, it was a revelation, and I was already part of the ICCC. I grew up as a son of a pastor. I've heard this verse preached many, many times from a charismatic perspective where they made it sound like, hey, here it is, black and white. Look at it. It says, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, and the wealth of the sinner finds its way eventually into the hands of the righteous, for whom it was laid up. And when they preach it, they leave out the first part. The good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. They just stick with the next part. The wealth of the sinner will come to the righteous. And they even prophesy about the transfer of wealth from the hands of the wicked to the righteous. But God opened up this verse to me, and He says, what they preach in churches is not what stand there in the Bible. That the book of Proverbs came about when wise men of old would observe society, and when they see a behavior that doesn't matter who does the behavior, a young man, an old man, a woman, doesn't matter, but if they do action A, it always result in result B, good or bad. So it then became a social law, and those days they didn't have writing instruments, so they would verbally transfer the law to their children and tell them, if you want to have the results, the good results, you have to do the action that will bring you to that results. So, or watch out, don't do that bad actions because it's going to give you this bad results. And when Solomon came to earth, he was a rich king, but also a wise man who made his own observations. And God then prompted him to write down all these wisdoms in the book of Proverbs. But you have to read the book of Proverbs as a book of social laws. And a social law, like a scientific law, is always true, regardless of who's the government of the day, uh, whether you start poor or not poor, whether you're educated or uneducated, whether you're a Christian or a non-Christian. If you do action A, it will always result in result B. So let's go back to Proverbs 13:22 from that perspective. It then says, in any time period, if you can find a man, woman, or couple that dedicate their earthly lives to leave an inheritance that is beneficial to society, moral stability, and goodness, and still functions during the time of their children's children, their grandchildren. That's part A. So it must be a legacy that's of benefit to society and still functions during the time of the children's children. That's part A. Then the wealth, the unused resources of the sinner, families who missed the mark and didn't do it, will come into the hands of the righteous, families who did the right thing. And that's the story of legacy. That's the story of gig and what God has been busy with me for since 2008.
Something I would like to add to this. Does this mean, Jasper, that if we have and we should have material, I'm talking just about material goods at the end of our lives, we should give it, like we should hand over it to the third generation, which are our grandchildren, than our children?
It's a good question, and if you read the culture of the Jews, it's exactly their culture. Uh, so that the grandparents, uh, by the time they die, the grandchildren are now young adults, newly married, maybe with kids, trying to set up a house, starting a business. And when the grandparents die, the grandkids inherit. And it gives them a start so that they don't have a bond on the house and they don't have to borrow money for business. So that's why the Jewish community is so extremely successful. And there are other reasons too, but it's not about material wealth from a sense I drive a big grand car and you don't have a grand car, or that my identity is in things. That's not what we talk about here. But it's talking about system, and wealth is that inheritance of moral stability and goodness includes exactly the things we're going to do in ICCC. Set up structures where our children can have good education, set up infrastructure where there's water, roads, stuff like that. That's the legacy that we're working on. But then also the understanding of how did it get there so that our children can continue to maintain it and replace it when something goes wrong. So to unpack that verse in Proverbs 13:22, God gave me a, a picture that I'm using that helps to understand it better. The impact of having a generational mindset versus not having a generational mindset. And you will see it play off in front of you in your country on a daily basis. And it's also true for us here in South Africa. So the typical mindset explained to you this yellow line. And the bottom talks about your lifespan in years, and you can expect to become 80 years old. And the vertical line explain your impact in society and your access to resources and wealth and things like that. Now, in the current one world system, we are uh, programmed to say you get born, then you grow up, you get some sort of education so that you can become employable. Then you look for a job. Then you work hard and you try and keep your job and work as hard as you can to reach the highest position possible. Because around about 50, you will have reached your career peak and they will start to replace you with younger people. And if you work carefully with money and you put it aside and you put it even in insurance policies and stuff like that, and you now eat your money slowly enough, it should last you until your dying day. And if you were a real good person, you will have enough money to leave, to pay for your funeral and to leave some money for your kids, and then you're gone. Will you agree that's the typical thinking around the world today? And what does it make us? If that's then the thinking, it makes us a society where in our lifetime we make it, then we eat it, and our children start at nothing. Then they make it, then they eat it, then the grandchildren start at nothing. Then they make it, then they eat it, and we perpetuate a poor society where we just survive one more week, one more month, one more year. Does it sound familiar? If I look at what impact that you had at old age, where's the line for this person? For most elderly people, they are considered a financial burden for the family and forgotten somewhere in the backyard of someone's home. Is that happening in Madagascar? I can tell you it's happening in South Africa.
Even here too. That's true.
So that's not an exciting story, but that's where
Mhm.
99% of population, Christians included, are heading until we can give them a better, better truth. And when you unpack Proverbs 13, verse 22, it tries to put your mindset at least into the future. So look at what can happen, not even two generations, just one generation. If and their question is, how do you think 30 years beyond your death? Let's say you had your children when you were 30 years old. How do you learn to think 30 years beyond your death when most people can't even think beyond next week, next month, worrying about what will be the impact of the economy or the next month or quarter? So you learn to think into the future by asking yourself a question every day you make a decision. By asking yourself, how will this decision, whether I purchase something, whether I commit myself to a business or a relationship, how will that help my children when they are old people in old age. That's how you think into the future. Then, if you start thinking like that, you will no longer make decisions about people saying, I want to wear brand clothes and impress people with my car. You will no longer make that kind of decisions. You will start asking, what's going to happen in the future? Where can I position my family so that we as a family can be better off after my death? And maybe you say people will always need accommodation. So let's find a piece of land and develop it into affordable accommodation units. And initially, it takes all your money. There's no money for going overseas and travel, buying new cars. But when this person's economic curve starts to go down, that piece of land that you built and developed is now has the city has grown to close to you, and now they're looking for accommodation. And all of a sudden, you've got a steady stream of income, and your income's economy goes up, not down, like most people. This is just one small example. And that's just the one generation, thinking one generation further than yourself. And if you think like that, in your old age, look at the impact that you still have, where maybe a week before your death, you still enter into a contract together with your children, knowing that they will carry it further, but it's a good contract for the family. Now, how many such old people do you currently know that lives the green line? And the answer will probably be very few. And that's not even God's best for society. So his best for society is Proverbs 13:22, where we need to think and act from a generational perspective. That's the purple line, where we start poor, grow up in a home where we didn't have much, we may not even have good education, but then as we progressed, we take our children with us on this journey so that they can learn the language of wealth, that we are not owners of anything, we are stewards, and we are not consumers, we are builders. But they may not even want to do what you're building, but you just release them in their gifting. But I believe for every family on earth, God has given you at least three business ideas that can create income for yourself and jobs for other people. And as you pursue it, you put it into the right legal structures, you bring the right people around you, you become more and more wealthy as you get older and older, and you just have fun being where God wants to use you. And then one day you just pass on. It's the end of your life, and only then have you reached your peak. And now your peak becomes the starting point for the next generation, and their peak, the starting point for the next generation. So, where for one generation families, they just exist from poverty to poverty. For generational families, there was once a founding parent that says the buck stops here, we're going to be different. Follow this line with the help of God, unpack the purpose of God in that family, and this family just grow and become stronger and stronger. And God showed me that in every community, in every country, there are these generational families that started many years ago, and they're now in the second, the third, and the fourth generation. And they are His blessing for that country because they can provide sustainable jobs to hundreds of thousands of citizens from all walks of life. So, if we want a better future for our country, we need to become these parents and then train other people to become these parents.
May I ask a question, please, Jasper?
Yes, Sonia?
Uh, I know what we were talking about. This refers to a family, but I'm also just thinking a little bit further as core team of ICCC. Is this also not something that can be done within the core team instead of individual families, but as a team, adopt a specific project or wait upon God? Sorry, for what God is in store, that will be able to uplift the country and that will be able to do something like that. Is it
Totally.
something that is more just applicable to a family, or is it something that can also be done
No,
as a core team?
it happens automatically when you have enough people sharing this generational mindset for their families.
Yeah.
When they now meet another person with the same sort of mindset, they automatically start seeing opportunities,
Okay.
and God uses them to as the catalyst to say, all right, work together. So all these business opportunities doesn't have to be you alone as a family. It could be you in conjunction with another family or a core group of people. All right, but I wanted to emphasize the importance of having a right generational mindset. Otherwise, you work with people who have still an expectancy like life owes me, someone needs to give me. Whereas when you see yourself as the founding parent, you know the buck stops here. If I'm not going to do it, nobody's going to do it for me. Government is not going to do it for me. The church is not going to do it for me. It's now between me and God to work out what He's got planned for me and my family. Now, obviously, in the context of a close group of ICCC people who talk the same language, we will automatically start attracting resources and networks and contacts to us that can help everybody. But you need to understand where I'm coming from with this whole thing. Okay. Then another verse in Proverbs 24:3 and 24:4 says, through skillful and godly wisdom is a house, a life, a home, a family built, and by understanding it is established on a sound and good foundation, and by knowledge shall its chambers of every area be filled with all precious and pleasant riches. So the key words in this whole thing is godly wisdom. That means God must give us the wisdom. We need to have understanding and we need to have knowledge. And it's always easier to find all of that in a collective such as the ICCC than to try and figure it out by ourselves. But I've just used this as a concept which you can also then adopt for yourself in Madagascar. But I say that in every family, you need to build your legacy house. And your legacy house will have a foundation, which is wisdom. In other words, which philosophy are you using? Are you using the biblical philosophy or are you using the man-made philosophy? So, man-made philosophies will keep you poor. God's wisdom will bring out the best of your family. Then, the walls of the house is wealth and well-being. And if that's strong, it will carry the roof and eventually the house. Now, wealth is the knowledge of how to build wealth. So you need to learn about selling skills, marketing skills, people skills, leadership skills, and all of that. But then you need to apply it in a project, and that's the well-being, so that you learn what you mean by marketing and all of that. But you'll only build the size of the house that you build for you and your family will depend on your vision of why are you put here on earth? What is the worth of that you have as a family? And it's going to take you your lifetime, you and your spouse's lifetime, to build this first house, figuratively speaking. But then, with your children learning the language, they can then in time add rooms to this house so it becomes a much bigger house. And the grandchildren can go and lift the roof and make it a double story. So, this, figuratively speaking, the house of Klute or the house of whatever is your surname will then grow from generation to generation. So that's then that's the background to thinking generation before I move on uh, into the rest of the thing. So once you say, I like this generation thinking, how do I do it? We've developed a journey which I can give you the websites. You can go and check it out and learn more about it. And like Taina said, she's got all of my book, and you can all get a free copy of the book. It's on a PDF copy. and by all means read it and use it as material. But we define struggle as not having money. If you look at your income minus expense, it keeps being a minus month after month. And if that's the situation month after month, even if you're a Christian, you can even be the pastor of the church, but internally you feel hopeless. And a lot of people walk around with their faces with a smile on it, but behind the smile, they live a life of quiet desperation. They don't know how to get out of it. Now, the only way you can get out of it is we need to learn how to make income more and expenses less. Now, as we work together and you work together as the ICCC, God will give you pointers as how do you apply it for yourself and then eventually do it for a bigger group. And that will bring you to stability where you now have hope because you have managed to make income less expenses a surplus and you no longer despair. Then you learn how to make that surplus work for you so that you can turn it into success where you have choices coming from three or more sustainable and growing income stream and you never leave this station. And as you become a specialist on your income streams, God will show you how to tweak it to make 1,000, to 10,000, to 100,000. And in becoming a master of your income streams, like that example that Nampun told us about that family that started off uh, in transport, now they're attracting other economic opportunities to them. And in time, they will have number four, number five, and that's going to be true for all of you. So that from that stable income stream basis, you can be released in your significance. And that's where you can now have meaning in your life, doing what God has called you to do and become a community champion. And that summarizes the journey of GIG as a family. Let me just see what else I have there. Okay. Uh, we Also, for those of you who are interested, and I know it's a mouthful, like Harry said, it's a lot of information for one night, but I'm going to give you all of this. It will be recorded and you'll have the PowerPoint slides. And then as you are ready for the next unpacking, we can give you the tools behind it. And that's what I do here in South Africa. So we've got families on their journey from struggle to significance. We have a bank to support it. But 2 years ago, I've also started to move into communities and give them a mindset to how do we turn my community into a kingdom community? And we've developed a process where we say if we can find two or three kingdom-minded people in a community, that's enough because the kingdom economics tells us where two or three on earth agree on anything, it's a done deal. Now, when we say community, we want to have an improved community, like the compelling vision. We will have one for a community as well. But from that first two or three people, we then look at their current networks and relationships to look for a core team of at least 5 people. Now, in South Africa, if you want to register a cooperative entity, you need 5 founding members. That's where I get 5 from. Now, God showed us that if we want to impact communities right now, that if you look at the X and a Y axis, the components of a community is made up of uh, business people on the one hand, people who think and act business. On the other hand, you have social support structures, which include churches and NGOs, but they almost work against each other. They pull away from each other because the churches makes the business people, the bad people in the picture and say, you exploit our workers and don't give them enough money. And that's the ills, the reason for all these ills. And the business people say, you're a bunch of hypocrites because our donations are good enough for you. So there's no trust in this side of the community. When you look at the vertical axis, on the top you have local governance, and at the bottom you have all the residents living in that community. But in South Africa, there's absolutely no trust because there's corruption in local governance, there's inabilities, inefficiencies, and even in the residents, a Muslim lives next to a Christian, next to an atheist. So we sit with a fragmented community. So God showed me that if we want to transform communities to kingdom, we need to start with that core that can speak. So out of that 5 people, we look for someone who's comfortable in the business environment, understand business, and can speak the business language. We look for someone who's comfortable in the NGO support structure, church structure, and can speak that language. And we need someone who's comfortable with governance, whether it's police or local governance, but can speak and understand where it fits in because they have their own problems. And then the other two can come from anywhere. But then once we have that core team of people, we then move to the next step and form a cooperative. So where we finalize a constitution. So a constitution is just the rules by which we will govern ourselves. We design a logo, we choose a name, and we register the co-op. And now that legal entity is God's structure that He uses in that community. We open a bank account, we finalize a vision for that community, we implement a membership program, a 12-month action plan, and then all sorts of things that I do with that community so that that community can now live as God intended. Next to them, we have a National Resource Center. I talked more about that just now. We have the community. In the community, lots of families with their own journey, but working collectively as a community so that God's unlimited, eternally lasting kingdom resources can now be released into that community, but aligned to God's perfect will for that family and that community. So that's just a vision of where we want to go within the ICCC world. And I'm already working in South Africa in some of those communities. And then if we do it correctly, these communities will become an economic hub where they can, in time, get resources from local government. In South Africa, we've got Black empowerment, so they can get some social grants and enterprise development funding. In South Africa, we have donors where we can give them tax certificates. We can give people access to venture capital if they come up with good projects in the community. But then we empower the community so that they are responsible for deployment of funds to create better infrastructure, create employment, and sustainable businesses.